Can't hear. We can't hear. I can't hear.
Yeah, I can't hear anybody in the room.
No, can I?
I can't either.
They can't hear us either.
Yeah, we can hear everybody on Zoom, just not in the physical room.
Can you wave to them?
Yeah, I tried to wave at him too.
I'll put it in the chat.
All right, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yeah, sure
Yeah.
can.
Yes.
We can't hear
Just,
you.
we just can't hear you, but you know, we're getting closer. Original sound.
More volume, you can't hear time.
January 9th. They said when she was on with
How's that? Anybody?
her children.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear.
We can't hear anybody.
Found it. Where might Daniel be? Is he here now?
Yes, he is. He was just here a second ago.
Oh, good, because he set it up. To tell me now, other than. Is there usually a mic in here?
Mike?
Oh, it's on, you got a mic on your.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
your mic.
And we have a. They can hear us, but we can't hear them. Oh, okay.
So you can't hear them? Is what you're saying?
Right. They can hear us. Hello.
Hey, Marty, can you hear me now?
I can hear, yeah.
Now we can hear you. Megan, you need to unmute yourself. Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Yeah.
Okay, we hear you now.
Oh, great.
Mark. Megan, sorry.
That's fine. Hello.
Turn it
Good
on.
morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Down a little bit.
All right.
Okay. Megan? This is Father Tom. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is that better? Not
Well,
blaring?
thank you for joining us. This is our Wednesday Bible study, and we're almost done with the book of Job. But before we continue, would you please introduce yourselves to your new parishioners?
Hi, I'm Megan Ryan, and I am coming to you from Clarksville, Tennessee. I am so excited to be beginning our ministry together in January. Really looking forward to it. I have a husband and 2 daughters. So Michael, Francesi, it's going to be very confusing for you because we all have different last names. I kept my maiden name, so I'm Megan Ryan. My husband is Michael Francesi. And then my daughter from my first marriage is Kenna Holland. She is 7 years old. And then Louise, Michael and I, our daughter, she is 14 months. So we are very busy with her. She's very busy. And actually, I won't be able to stay the entire time because we don't have any childcare currently. My husband is a freelance architectural designer, and he has a meeting a little later in the morning. So I'm going to take over on baby
You're free
duty.
to sign off anytime you need to.
Yeah.
All right.
I went to Virginia Theological Seminary and I graduated with my MDiv in 2011.
This is
I
on the
worked-
boost.
I worked in churches in Western Kentucky, where the tornadoes plural hit. So I have many former parishioners that have been deeply affected, have lost homes, lost everything. So I served those churches in kind of a 3-point cure after seminary. And then I went on to become an interim rector of a church in Western Kentucky. And then finally the rector of Trinity Episcopal Church here in Clarksville, where I have been the rector for the last 6 years. And then Christ Church found me and I found Christ Church, and here we go.
Fantastic. All right. Any questions for Mother Megan?
Yeah, feel free to ask me anything.
They're shy. A little bit. Not usual. Come again?
First date shy, after that.
All right.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right. Let's read the Bible. The Lord be with you.
So would you.
Let's pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks once again that you've called us to this place at this time for your holy purpose. We ask your Holy Spirit to enliven our conversation and to open up your scriptures for our understanding. We ask that in all that we do over the next hour or so would be to your glory, and your glory alone. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So I wasn't here last week. Father Keith led you, I think, in the probably, at least for me, the most important chapters of Job. And I wonder what you guys learned and about Job last week, and what did you like? What did you not like? Questions? Did you get it all figured out?
At the point we're not supposed to.
Hey, Bob, if you could be Moripovich for us.
I said that was the point. We're not supposed to.
Good. What else? You mean we're not supposed to what? Understand it?
There are actions in our existence, our God-created existence, that we are incapable of understanding. ultimately we are incapable of fully understanding God.
Fair enough. What else? You remember, if you weren't there last week, this is the time when finally, after the prologue and then the big middle of the poetry of Job, and Job's had his chances, and Job's three friends, they've had their opportunities to chime in over and over and over again. And now it's God's, it was last week, God's chance to speak for God's self, right? Out of the whirlwind, right?
I think I got something beyond the mystery and the understanding that God is God and I'm not,
Yeah.
which we all kind of agreed to. I think in God's second conversation, or it might be the third, but it's the one toward the end, I did get something new, and we talked about that last week, and that was the first conversation, or the one that I remember as earlier, was talking about all, in such beautiful poetry, the creative power of God and the majesty, and presenting it in such a way that we got the idea, well, we're certainly incapable of all of that creation and all of that majesty, so therefore that's the first lesson, we're not God. But the second part, when he brings in the behemoth and Leviathan,
Yes.
I got a new idea. I even wrote in my Bible that these are symbols for me of evil and fear, and that God is saying, you don't want to handle this by yourself. No, I want to be your protector, your accompaniment, because I can handle the fear of and evil and the scary parts of life. And so that was new for me.
Sure. But what do you make of, in light of what you just said, what do you mean? The behemoth and the Leviathan are part of God's created order. What do you make of that? It's still evil.
I don't think it's evil. I don't think it's evil that God created that. I think that God is saying that our created world has potential to make you scared to death.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, and I, I can attest to my own scared to death moments, so I think God's right on there.
Yeah.
And it's saying our world contains this potential, but I will be there with you and I know how to tame it, so rely on me.
Nice. Okay, I'll take it. What else?
Yeah, just along those lines, had two notes, which I've lost now, but one was, we may not see evil or know what evil is in this world from the perspective of God. You know, what is, we think is evil may not be evil, and I guess what we think is good may not be good in his infinite wisdom. And the second thing is, I think I naturally identify with Job as a sufferer, but at the end, Father Keith said it's really, God blesses Job's friends, and they were really representing us as the populace, which I thought was interesting.
Say that again. Father Keith said about the friend.
At the end, God, in the scripture, God blesses the friends of Job, which are there to possibly represent us. And I can see that role where I can be righteous and point out that, you didn't do this, you didn't do that.
Yeah.
But I naturally identify with Job because he was the main character, and we're all trying to learn how to get through suffering.
Well, we haven't gotten to that part yet. What actually, where did you guys stop? Chapter 41. So we haven't yet sort of discussed what happens. We go back for a second to chapter 40. Right? God has had God's chance to say what he wants to say, right? And now on chapter 40, what do you, God is asking Job, what do you have to say for yourself? And Job answers, right? And he says, Job says, I'm using the Message, by the way. I'm speechless. I'm in awe. Words fail me. So you get the idea that Job's going to respond. But then God says, oh, hold on a second, I got something more to say. And that's when we got Behemoth and Leviathan, right? And basically, as God continues, it's more of the same. I'm God and you're not, deal with it, right? So let's pick that up right now on chapter 41. Leviathan and I think it's just Leviathan. If you have any questions about that, apart from what Louise said. This is what it says in the Message, what Eugene Peterson says. This is God. I run this place. I like that. That is consoling for people that are suffering. If something really bad happened to you, would these and you can use your imagination. If something bad happens, you think that it would be consoling to you to say, well, there's this thing called Leviathan, and
If I had a 5-year-old daughter.
Wait.
Year-old daughter that I love very deeply.
Mhm.
And she came down with leukemia for unexplained reasons and dies. I wouldn't find any comfort in this.
Others? Anybody online?
I can say without going into a long story that I had a 9-year-old that had the threat of cancer in his eye. And I was so far from God at that point. I mean, I had been through a few things myself, and when this fell upon my son, I was like, done.
Yeah.
I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm hurt. How could this happen?
Did you have Job's friends?
Oh, yes, they were joking. But I also had friends who said, that's okay if you're angry. I'm going to stay here with you and pray.
Yeah.
And during that surgery that was conducted by a brand new oncologist from China, who I assumed was a Christian, just because of my stupid prejudices or understandings. The surgery had its tough parts, but in the end, it turned out that what they thought was a cancer was an AV malformation, which had shown itself up as solid on all the tests that were common at the time. So there were some technical difficulties with the surgery, and there was moments of panic and stuff, but I didn't pray, but I felt prayer around me. I was even a little angry at it.
Mhm.
One of my friends was very charismatic. She says, I'm going to pray that Jesus is at the head of the operating table. And I remember thinking, rolling my eyes and thinking, I'm not there, you know?
Yeah.
But thank God my friends were. So at the end, it turned out he didn't have cancer. It was something that it was a difficult surgery, but could be faced on. And here's the beautiful point.
Yeah.
At the end of the surgery, the doctor came out, who I had spoken to, but he was 2 weeks new from China. He said, at points of the surgery, I felt the prayer in the room. And I was like blown away. And then another guy comes up in scrubs and says to me, my little boy was in recovery then. I got kind of connected with your son. Can I go see him? Sure. And I looked at him and I said, who are you? You know, and he said, I'm the anesthetist. I stand at the head of the operating table. Then I look at his little tag. Now, this was Miami, but what do you think his name was? Not. And then I had the humor of God telling me, it's just one story.
It's a good story.
I hope I never forget it. I don't.
I think, if I may, I think it's hard to find the comfort in this passage. But there is comfort to be found because we do come up against things that we couldn't possibly handle on our own, that we just can't even begin to process on our own. And the fact that God, you know, has all of this under God's control, I think that is a comfort. It's difficult to find though, because God seems a little braggy in the passage. But I mean, that's our own human reading. Yeah. But I do think that is a comfort when we come up against things that are just impossibly large.
Yeah. Nice, very nice. What else? Home church. We done it? Please.
I think part of it is maybe where you're kind of at in terms of going into a horrible challenge or hardship, because if you have the perspective that life is hard and it's just that way, then I think you're quicker to maybe find the comfort in that reading versus having a different kind of thing. So I think it's really where you are in the way you view what our purpose is, you know, as a human being.
I don't think that there's, at least for my part, I don't think that there's a right answer to how in any individual handles suffering. Whereas our response to suffering is as varied as we are. Right? And some, you know, I think I would have probably been angry like Louise was, at least for some time. But I don't know. I haven't walked through that particular hardship. There's no right answer about how to respond to those. And for some people, that particular passage that we were talking about Leviathan, for some people that could be very comforting. For others, not at all. But what we really shouldn't do is to judge other people's response.
Yeah, the way I look at it is Jesus' love somehow transforms suffering. I have a brother with stage 4 colon cancer. And every week, every treatment, he sends a picture of his kids and his family dressing up. way that brings laughter, joy to the nurses. And ever since, and he's trying to outlive a cure. For 3 years, we've had a 6 siblings have a text chain. It's brought so much joy and share. But I do have a question for you. I wanted to ask it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
In your personal life, in your survivor of stroke, in your holy life, what are the top 3 places in Job or in the Bible in general that really brought you comfort? That, you know, for those of us that have so far skated through life without a major tragedy, although I did lose a 17-year nephew to cancer, but that's another variety. You know, what parts of the Bible did you
That's a great question. If this is by way of just background, that's maybe some of you don't know, but I had a stroke, a massive stroke. It feels like forever ago. It was 3 years ago, almost 4.
Give you the microphone.
Yeah, you bet. I had a stroke, I think it was 3 years ago or so, or almost 4. It was in, well, actually, it was in June. So let's say 3.5 years ago. I had just become the rector here. I had 2 months. Then I'll spend, you know, I thought I could do it, and I will. What part of the difficult is that my stroke was not because of any underlying health concerns. I had a stroke because of violence, and violence that was done to me by a family member who was suffering from mental illness. And he attacked me, and then in the sort of melee of that attack, he dissected my carotid artery, and that's what caused my stroke. And the question was about which scriptures gave me consolation. Is that right? And that's hard to say. It's really hard for me to pinpoint a verse. I can tell you that I went through all of those emotions. Why me? Why now? What does this mean? And really all I can say is that I can't point to one particular scripture or book of the Bible. But I can tell you that my faith got me through it. And other, other supports, principally my doctors and all of the medical professionals that attended me, both at Mayo when I was there right away, and then at Brooks for another week or 10 days. But when something like that happens to you, and especially when the doctors say things like, and this was, I wasn't awake at that time, I would say to my wife, he may not make it. Or if he makes it, he won't be able to speak at all. Or he might be able to walk. You know, anybody who's had a stroke, every stroke is different. And every stroke manifests itself in different ways. And when I woke up and I realized that I couldn't speak at all, as they say, I had my whole life flashed before my eyes. As I make my living with speaking. I thought that's all gone. And now what do I do? And my medical team did a great job. But 2 weeks later, they said, good luck. That's the end of it. And I needed more than that. My words were coming back, but just. And I needed speech therapy and a lot of it. And my wife, thankfully, she said she would not take no for an answer. I needed to be in a intensive speech therapy program. And every time we tried to enroll in one, there was no space. I had to wait for 6 or 9 months before an opening would. And then by that time, if you know how strokes work, especially with speech, the clock is ticking. Right? And we prayed and we prayed. My wife, as I said, she willed and prayed. And 2 different programs opened. 2 people who were enrolled decided at the last minute to disenroll, and they gave me that spot. And, so I'm sort of rambling, but to get back to your question, was the entirety of the Bible on any particular day. I guess what I'm saying is that reading the Bible was a part of, really important part of my recovery. Because I had a lot of forgiveness work to do. With the person that was responsible for what happened. And that's, you know, we're doing really, really well. This is my son, by the way. And we couldn't be where we are today, loving each other and moving forward without the Bible every day. I say it from time to time whenever I teach here, when I'm preaching. Please don't let the Bible be something that you just hear on Sunday. You have to. And you all, I'm preaching to the choir because you all are here at a Bible study. A lot of people, especially liturgical Christians or mainline Protestants, sadly, don't take the Bible seriously enough. But having my Bible right next to me through my trials and tribulations was invaluable. The Psalms, especially. So yeah, I know I'm rambling, but it's prayer, first of all, at least for me, prayer, and knowing that you all were praying for me and still are, and that the faith of my wife and others that were really close to me at the time. So prayer, and then the scriptures, and love that that can conquer those kinds of sufferings. You don't get over it really, but it is somehow it's redeemed by those prayers and the love of the gathered community. And obviously Jesus Christ. So anyway, enough. All right. Any questions about that? We're on page, chapter 42. And this is where Job basically says, sorry about that, God. I'm convinced you can do anything and everything. No one can upset your plans, etc. So I'm reading the message, obviously. This is Job saying, I get it. You're God and I'm not. And that was enough for Job in the end. God came to Job and it was enough. And really, that, as I read Job, that should be the end. But there's a little epilogue where I gotta think that it was added later, like a few other parts that we talked to, but basically it says Job's friends, God sort of chastises those friends. And it says to the friends, all that stuff that you've been saying, you were wrong about all of that. And I'm not happy about that. And then to sort of put a point on it, he says, you friends, you got to give Job some of your stuff and as a sacrifice. And then we get the sort of, if you like, the happy ending. It's interesting to me, anyways, that as Job is being restored, that God starts with his livestock. Sort of recapitulates everything that Job had lost, and then he gets more. Right? And oh, by the way, he also once God has given back all of the livestock, and by the way, also his kids as well. And he lived happily ever after. And I wonder what you think about that. And Yeah, what do you think about that? Hold on.
I got the mic. I got the talking stick.
You win.
I have to just ask the group, before we get to that, which I think is a very interesting point. But at the end of when Job is saying, you know, I'm an idiot, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He says both in the message and in the more typical, one is I learned of you by hearsay, and the other was I learned about you by rumor.
Yeah.
And I wondered if people noticed that and what they thought what was the message for us there. I think there's a message, I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah. What do you guys think, church?
You know, what is it to know God by rumor or hearsay?
Well, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it means we have to exercise some discernment about what we hear about God. But taking it further, I think that's why I'm here in this particular room and like to hear what other people are thinking as they search for God.
Yeah.
Because it is a mystery, and we can just stop the search by saying, "You're God, I'm not," it's a mystery, or we can keep listening to scripture and to each other and get to an understanding. But I don't know what he meant exactly. Maybe what my friend said about you. Now I've heard from you directly, so I kind of get it.
Come on, church.
I just share, I think it's kind of like the world, the duality. It's either or, but it's not either, what was it, hearsay or rumor. It has to come from within. And I think Jesus used that a lot, like with Caesar's coin, you know, give to Caesar what's Caesar and give to God what's God. So at one point, that's how I understood that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, that, as you know, I don't know the answer. But I think that there's a part of that, that I don't know what, without doing a words, study about that word, English word, what the Hebrew skill. But so I don't know. Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Yeah, but I really like what you said, which is that we don't just stop after we say it's a mystery. We are still on that journey. And the answer is not likely to change, but the commitment is that we walk together despite the fact that we don't have all of the answers.
Maybe there's tiny corners of the mystery that we can illuminate for one another.
Sure.
Yes, it's a mystery. I was thinking about this and Job's friends. And let's assume that, well, this is not an assumption, that in Jewish belief that the first 5 books, the Torah, really are paramount in their theologic thinking. That's an assumption. And that if we look at those 5 books, and especially Deuteronomy, there is a thing called Deuteronomistic thinking that sin does cause suffering. Sort of echoing in what Job's friends are telling him.
Yep.
So they are expressing what I would assume was the best Jewish thinking at the time of the building of the Torah. This is human theologic thinking that's acceptable. So the real question is, at least in Job, which is a later work than I assume the Torah, that this kind of thinking is wrong. Um, And therefore, do we really, using human reason, have the ability or the right to make God in our image or construct God? And I started thinking about this a few days ago, and I says, you know, every Sunday I say the creed, the triune God. This is our construct. How can we come up with this? Am I really sort of like Job's friend, just believing stuff because somebody theologically more advanced than me and using human reason has come up with this?
It's a great question. What does your heart say?
What?
What does your heart say?
Do the best I can.
What else? When you close your eyes and you make a picture of God, what does that God look like? And is that image worthy of your worship?
I can't, so far in my thinking, I have a hard time forming an image, which in a way is a noun.
Sure.
And I really think of God as a verb, and it's just one word, love. And I just fall back on that.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad for that. You know, we have a tendency to think of God as transactional. If I do these things, God will bless me, and if I do these other things, God will curse me. That's a really, I think, dangerous way to live your life. For my part, it doesn't give me any consolation.
I was just gonna say, kind of following up on what we said too, is that the rumor thing for me is maybe an issue of spiritual maturity, that at some point in your life, your ideas of God are all you know from other people's ideas of God, right? And so there are as many of those as there are people, and every one of us, that idea of God is colored by our circumstance, our context, our family, our upbringing, our social location, our the country we live in, a million different things, right? And so that can be pretty huge disparities when it comes to, you know, is God loving? Is God wrathful? Is God judgmental? Is God active in the world? Is God a puppet master? Whatever. And so I think we all concoct something that makes sense to us or feels true to us. And then maybe as we grow in spiritual maturity, there's a deeper truth that takes that into context, but that makes room for mystery and makes room for something more expansive than maybe we thought before. So he was faithful, but he didn't have that deep kind of transcendent experience of God that felt beyond.
Right. But now he does.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And, you know, Job has the advantage because God did go to Job in the whirlwind. Job has, he's got at least one step ahead of us, right? Because I haven't had that experience of the whirlwind, and God hasn't come and shown me what God has shown Job. And I think you're exactly right. And like you were saying, in some ways, we all make God an island. I hope that, as you were saying, as our spiritual life matures, what's left is all of that other stuff fits. That's my conception of
Yeah, I think my comment is kind of there, because what I've been developing over maybe the last 20 years of my life, trying to figure out who God is that I look at everything that I hear from people and from Christians who say God is this, that, or the other, even non-Christians. If what they believe urges them to love and to be inclusive,
Mhm.
then I listen carefully. If that doesn't happen, then I pretty much push that away until their concept of God matches my expectation that if God is love, and we truly understand and have that moment where it's not hearsay anymore, but it's, you know, God may have come to me in the anesthetist, you know? And so I keep going back to that, but there was love there. There definitely was, and inclusion. And so that's it for me. Listen, keep my heart open and see what others' expectations of God encourages them to do. I think I mentioned once that I had a friend, a priest, who said when he got on an airplane, he didn't ever want to wear his collar because people always engaged him in weird conversations. But one time it happened, and he ended up sitting next to an atheist who was just like jumping to talk to him. And so they had this, you know, conversation about, does God exist even? And the priest said, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And he described that God, right? And the priest said, I don't believe in that God either. Now let me tell you about the God I believe in. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
I don't know if I have anything to add, but rumor, has a negative connotation. Another way to say it might be, we have our stories, and we have stories based on our experience and stories based on others' experience. And obviously throughout our faith history, people like Jesus, Paul, others come in and throw this huge boulder into the water, and these ripples come from their life, and especially the resurrection. And we hear that, and most of us second, third, or 1,000 hand from that event. But the stories have a purpose of holding us in place.
Yeah.
And then, like I think I heard you saying, but then the stories have to be critiqued at some point, or added to, maybe is a better word, is, okay, that was a story then that helped so many people come to faith and love and courage. But, what is it today? And then we each are invited, for our experience may not be like Paul's, but that's what contemplative practice can be, silence can be, that some type of engagement of God that is more personal, which is, I think, the point. And hopefully without all the things that Job had to go through, but often suffering, the things that we go through are those opportunities to go deeper and to find that God beyond the God of our imagination, that it's not transactional. And what this book I used last week, Carol Newsom, if you want extra reading, Contest of the Moral Imaginations, but at least part of it is just appreciation of the sublime. There's stuff we don't get, and that's what worship is. We just bow down and say, I don't get it, but we trust in God. A contest of the moral imagination. I'm not sure if it's plural or not. That's contest, like a contest, I think, debate. And her name is Carol Newsom. She's a retired professor at where I went to seminary. She's written at least 2 or 3 books.
My last question, I've hit my limit, but just coming out of Job, and I don't know if the word's correct, but are there other instances in the Bible where God conspired with Satan? For instance, I know Jesus is God, and after the desert, being tempted by Satan. But are there other ones in the Bible?
Depends on how you define, I think, Satan and God. And story. There's a story in the gospel, where Judas is getting ready to betray Jesus. Some question about whether God let that happen by Satan moving into there's other.
Isn't there also the 40 days in the desert
Yeah, of
after
course.
Jesus' baptism?
It's a really interesting study about Satan and the devil. The Bible doesn't speak of one voice in regard to a lot of things, most things. One of those things is the devil. Just want to go back real quick, ask the question, and then you guys went a different way, and that's fine. But is the happy ending, does it make sense to you, or not? And the reason why I ask it is because when I've suffered, sometimes there's not a hiding bow at the end.
Yeah, anytime something doesn't make sense, and that kind of doesn't make sense, you
Yeah.
know, that I throw it into the metaphor, what else could it mean?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's almost like, well, there's two things. I like the little twist about God asking Job to intercede for his friends who have screwed up by not being as honest as Job himself was to say, okay, I get it, I'm nothing. That's intriguing to me because it's about how the community pleads for God's attention and prays for one another. So the sacrifice is accepted by God because the three, offer the sacrifice knowing that Job is going to intercede for them. And then right after it actually says God receives the sacrifice of the friends.
Yeah.
And Job pleading for them and then returns everything. Okay, so now I get to the tough part. I think when one has been healed after anger and resentment and you get to a place of understanding that there may be a metaphorical sense to the riches that he has again.
Sure.
Like you almost die and then you're alive and you're not dead. And now everything is beautiful.
There you go. Nice.
Now that I think is the way I can understand that somehow everything that he had was enough as long as he wasn't in the active suffering and he got through that. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I realize the circumstances are quite different, but the gospel does have a Job-like ending. This horrible suffering in the passion of Christ, the crucifixion, the death, turns into something more glorious, just as the epilogue does.
Nice. I haven't thought about it. Yeah. All right, friends. Have we done it? Are we done with Job?
Never done with it.
No, we're not. But thank you for joining this journey. And Keith, you want to come up and
Yeah, just what's next, and we still have time if you have strong other ideas, but one, we're gonna take a break, so that's definitely what's next. So that's the next 3 weeks, so these two in December, and we'll start back on January 12th. So mark your calendar, and our goal, what Tom and I have been talking about, is to do that book that many of you have taken. And you don't necessarily need to have read it, but it's how the Bible actually works. And I still have copies in my office if you need one, or if you want to buy it online. I think there's a Kindle version. But that'll help us kind of re-engage scripture and how we read the scripture, especially from the Episcopal Church point of view. We're not fundamentalists, but we are people who take the Bible very seriously to form our faith and lead us day to day. And then what we're thinking about doing then, starting in February, probably a longer term study, is the Gospel of Luke, which is our Sunday gospel. And so switch back to the New Testament. Anyone object to doing the New Testament? Right? I know we've been doing the Old Testament a long time, which is good. It's important. But so maybe do Luke, unless, does someone have another idea or another preference of what they'd like us to think about doing? Okay, so 3 weeks off, 3 weeks probably on how the Bible actually works. I have copies if you need it, and then Luke until Jesus comes back.
Any
Or not.
questions? Concerns? Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you for the study. Very much.
Take some time to help people understand.